Welcome to Gamma Hydra Section 10. You are now in the neutral zone.
The neutral zone.
Gamma Hydra Section 10.
Welcome to the neutral zone. My guest today is Dave Galanter, a famous author of Star Trek. Certainly
Not that famous.
Not that famous. So, you've written a couple books. They are?
I've written probably 7 or 8 maybe Star Trek books. There were some TNG novels, a Voyager novel, some classic series novels, some novellas that were classic series, and some short stories as well, ebooks, things like that. So there's a lot there. The 2 most recent books I've written, though, were classic Star Trek, a very sort of Spock-centric. One called Troublesome Minds and the other called Crisis of Consciousness, which was really a dive into what makes Spock tick and what might make him go toward Kolinar at the end of the series.
Interesting. And I've read both of them, almost finished with the other one. They're both excellent, I will add.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll give you your $5 later.
So my question, first of all, do you have out of the TOS and TNG, do you have a preferred genre of Star Trek that you like, that you lean towards?
I think probably because it's the first series I saw, classic Star Trek. The original series is my base Star Trek, which isn't to say that I don't like writing the other ones and that I don't enjoy the other ones, but I think that's my home brew, as it were. Sure. And that's what I enjoy probably the most.
So how did you get started obviously you're a Star Trek fan, so how did you get started in writing?
I've always written. I started writing in, I think, the 4th grade. And so I think that's true of a lot of writers. You just decide that you need to write stuff down and write stories out. I got into Star Trek by actually meeting another Star Trek author, before I was one, in a bookstore. And they happened to live very close. We became good friends. And they sort of taught me how to write.
Well, that's convenient.
Which doesn't happen probably a lot. I will be deleting their address information so they can't do it again later. I think I snuck in the way others don't usually. It was a good way to get into it, and that door is probably closed now. Yeah. Because these days you need an agent, and it has to be submitted through a process. But back then it was sort of the Wild West, and it was a lot more open.
Right. Even these webcasts, I have to pass through CBS.
Right.
To get them to say
well,
okay. Yes.
And certainly all the books have to go through CBS. They approve the outline, and then they approve the manuscript when it's done.
Yeah. Apologize for the noise in case you're hearing. We are running tours, so this is an active set today, so that's why there's a little bit of background noise.
There should be a lot of noise, so we have a lot of people.
Yes. So my next question would be, what is the process as someone who doesn't write? How do you go about writing? Like, do you just come up with an idea? Do you start writing? What is it?
I think when I first started writing, I would come up with a science fiction idea that I wanted to explore. And I think now my process is more, I want to come up with a personal story that I want to tell, not for me, but for one of the characters, and then what's the science fiction that I can weave through that or wrap around it, that has the science fiction element. But these days I want the personal story to take the forefront. I think that's, was anybody watching Star Trek that much for the science of the fiction, or were they looking for the personal relationships and the characters?
Sure.
And I think they were more looking for, Spock is interesting, right. Kirk is interesting, right. McCoy is interesting. These people are interesting, and there are stories to tell about them. And then, of course, the way you get that out is maybe putting in the 2 books I mentioned, Spock goes through a lot, and there's a science fiction-y reason for it. But it's his own, personal drama that's hopefully more interesting to the reader.
So obviously, you seem to lean towards Spock as kind of your favorite character.
Actually, I wrote a novella in the Mere Anarchy series that was a Kirk McCoy buddy movie, sort of, in a sense. It took place after the Enterprise came back from its 5-year mission and before the motion picture, and Kirk wants to take McCoy out to go do something that an admiral wouldn't normally do. It's sort of an undercover sort of a thing.
Right.
And McCoy just keeps, poking at him, needling him. Like, what do you want to be out here? What are you doing behind a desk?
Right.
And so that's sort of the story. We see the formation of why Kirk might do the horrible thing that he did to Matt Decker's son, because it was a horrible thing.
He did. He kicked him with the curb on that.
He did. Although obviously he had his own story that
Sure.
Maybe he would have gotten the Enterprise back if he hadn't become a new life form.
You don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. So, well, that's just because I've always, as far as, I enjoy TOS is probably where I lean towards as far as a reader. I like Scotty stories. There aren't that many. It seems like a lot of people don't really focus on
Crisis
Scotty.
of Consciousness has a subplot with
That's true.
Scotty
Yeah.
and why he was interested in Carolyn Palamas.
True.
Which, by the way, read the book if you want to find out why.
I think the reason I've always related to Scotty is as my, I'm not an engineer, but I always lean that way, more technical.
Mm-hmm.
I work with computers and stuff like that in my real-time job. So I think I relate to him. So I think that's how, at least for me, I think each person kind of relates to the characters that kind of relates to their life.
I probably relate to Spock somewhat like that because I do like logic and reason. And I try to stick to them as much as I can, but I'm an emotional person like anybody else,
Sure.
like Spock certainly is. And my emotions will come out because I'm not Vulcan, but I try to temper them very quickly with reason. And so I appreciate him for that. It's hard not to like all of them because they were all very good characters. But yeah, Spock probably. The last two books are probably about Spock because he strikes an emotional chord with me.
So what's maybe on the horizon? What are you maybe you can give us a glimpse, not giving any trade secrets away.
I don't have anything approved or that I've sent in yet, but I do have an idea seed in the back of my head, and it's more of a Kirk novel than it is because I believe that there is fertile ground still with these characters, and there's always things that we're not going to know that we can find out, and that's really the purpose of the books. They're far more internal. You get that internal monologue. You see more how the mind works, and I think there's a story to be told with Kirk and some of the choices that he makes in his life. Like I say, I had some idea from the last two books of what might push, without coming out and saying it necessarily, what might push him toward Kolinar. Well, I think there are some interesting choices that James Kirk makes that I'd like to maybe explore. So we'll see.
Interesting. So, all right, now it's time for the shameless plug.
Okay.
You've been to these sets several times. You've been involved with this group for quite a while.
I love this
You're
place.
good friends with James.
I am.
You've seen the evolution here.
Yes.
Over the years. Give me your opinion. I know what it is, but
I'd always told James when I saw the sets 10 years ago that they were amazing and beautiful, but James, why are you working so hard to perfect them? He'd actually talked way back when about the possibility of there being this, he was working, I'm sure, with CBS licensing for many years about it, and the reason for the perfection is this, and I have to imagine, I wasn't there 50 years ago, I have to imagine this is better than it would have been, because I think there was probably more care taken.
Probably, I think
now than then.
I will tell you that, and if you watch the interview we did with Bijo and John Trimble, who were there,
they were there.
Of course, we've had
Walter and
Nichelle here, but
Bill
Bijo gave me the biggest compliment, and she didn't even know she did. She walked into engineering, saw the warp core, which I lit, just shameless plug. Because that's what I did in television, was lighting, and I lit that along with other people. It wasn't just me, but I've been working on engineering. And she said, nobody's ever done that exact. You guys nailed it. It was exactly like. And in fact, we discovered that even though if you walk in visually, your eyes may not say this doesn't look quite the same as the show as far as the amount of light in the room, but when you take a still photograph of it or video, it clicks. In fact, I think we showed a picture on our phones of when we did some of the lighting work. We showed it to James, and James goes, "Is that a screen cap from the show?"
You can't
James
tell.
said that.
You can't tell. My first time on the set, I remember being in sick bay, and James, I said to James, "Oh, it's tiny." And he took me by the shoulders, and he moved me to where the camera used to sit. And I'm like, "Oh, there it is."
And working in television for the many years, sets are always smaller than they appear on. I mean, that's
Which,
just,
by the
it's
way,
type of lenses
all
they
of
use
this
going out.
helps in writing a book. It helps to know how many steps there are from Spock station to Kirk's chair.
It's interesting.
Because you don't see their feet
Sure.
on the TV show, but I've counted it out and I've put it in, and it just helps to know the size of things because everybody has different shaped hands. But here, I'm able to see how this actually
And I
how it
guarantee you,
feels.
that's accurate. Because James has had us
believe it.
rebuild stuff that was close, but was off an inch.
Yeah.
And he will say, no, we got to
has
redo it. It's not right.
It's basically a museum
So,
to the original series, and I love spending every moment I can here.
That's why we come up here.
Yep, it is.
Well, thanks for your time.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate it. We're always glad to have you guys when you come up. So
We love it here.
Thanks again.
Yep.
That's all for this episode. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Go to StarTrekTour.com for more information about tours, special events, and tickets.